Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshops. We're in the middle of the week and in the middle of the day for some of us. We get together and talk different things about technology. As been our schedule, the third Wednesday of the month is Linux. So today we're here for Learning Linux. We've got Dave Melton and Cal Esneault and myself. Orv Beach decided that today it was going to be more fun to go get his knee replaced than to be with us for a Wednesday workshop. He'll be back next month, hopefully, and we wish him well this morning because I'm guessing it's going to be about right now for California time. Today we've got a number of different topics that we're going to do today, and so I'm just going to start and turn things over to Dave Melton and have him take it away.
Okay then, thank you, John. So let me figure out how to share my screen here. And screen 2. I think you should be able to see my screen right now.
Yes.
I've got a whole bunch of messages on top there that I didn't expect, but anyway, so one of the subjects today is my distro-hopping journey, and John and I discussed it, and we decided that I was going to do that since I've been doing quite a bit of distro hopping. And I thought I would share a few of the distros that I've played around with over the last, I don't know, 10, 11 months, something like that. This is not a comprehensive list. It is just a list of the few of the distros that I have tried out. So here we go. So in 2013, I bought a Raspberry Pi. And as you can see in my notes here, I thought I was going to turn it into a NAS for home use. And didn't quite work out that way. But what was that all about? I don't know what happened. I must have leaned on my keyboard. So anyway, that's kind of my beginnings with Linux, was on the Raspberry Pi in 2013. And then in 2021, Judy suggested, my club president, Judy Tallur, suggested that I come to visit these Wednesday morning Learning Linux workshops. And so I did. And I got hooked, and I've been playing around with Linux pretty much continuously ever since, except for life. And so I started doing some research, and I decided I liked the Debian branch, as Cal has shared. There are many branches of Linux, and I like the way Debian does things, and so I jumped into Debian. So my first download was Debian Xfce, and I found it very simple to install. It has a very simple menu across the bottom, the dock or whatever each Linux distribution calls it. It also has a menu, which I have shown here in the picture. And I think the menus are easy to navigate and pretty friendly and descriptive. The desktop is somewhat customizable, but I soon started looking at other Linuxes, other distributions. But so some of my dislikes on this is I like using the keyboard as opposed to the mouse. So I like keyboard shortcuts, and I found it not very friendly to change keyboard shortcuts. And I also found, being that it's Debian and it's a stable release of Linux, that the software store was pretty limited. It's all very tested out by Debian themselves. So unless they like it, it's not in their software store. So if you want to download something that is not in their software store, you have to do it from the command line and figure out how to do it that way. So from there, I moved on to Debian, still staying with the Debian family. I moved into KDE-Plasma. And I really like the KDE-Plasma desktop. I find it very customizable. It's still, being that it's Debian, is very stable. I think the menus are friendly. And I like the ease of being able to customize keyboard shortcuts. So that again, that's one of my main drivers, I guess. Some of my dislikes with Debian Plasma is I had a really hard time installing it in a virtual machine. I figured out a workaround so that I could install it. And this is actually an image from one of my virtual machines. Just like all of the ones I'm going to show you are images from the virtual machines I have running. Again, still being Debian, the store is limited, just like it is with Xfce. So I tried another one, and I really liked Elementary OS. Initially, I liked the dock down here at the bottom with their apps. They put their apps there, and that's basically what you get. They like to keep control over it. I demoed this at one of my club meetings, and Judy really liked the desktop, so she copied the desktop picture, and I've seen it on several of her different presentations. If you're a Mac user, this is very, very similar to a Mac, having the dock at the bottom and then very limited information at the top. Let's see, what don't I like about Elementary and what caused me to move on? I don't like the Pantheon desktop, which is what this is. And it's Mac-like, and they have the controls over on the left-hand side of the window instead of the right-hand side. And being that I'm a Windows person, I have gotten used to having everything on the right-hand side of the window. And I got frustrated when I wasn't able to figure out how to change those. So again, because they're very much in control, their software store is also limited. I recently, in the last couple of months, went to Pop! OS, and I liked it quite a bit. And I actually even installed it on my older desktop, my older laptop, and I used it for a while. I installed a virtual machine manager so that I could create virtual machines on it. And it's a nice distribution. It's easy to install. It's pretty friendly. It's local, and you get pop-up messages. As you can see in this image here, there is one app that needs to be updated. You can also see it here. It's really tiny, but I think it's probably a 1 there as well. That's the Pop Shop. And I've been reading recently that System 76, who puts out Pop! OS, is coming out with a renewed Cosmic desktop environment. The Cosmic desktop is, as you can see here, is based on Gnome, but they've decided that they want to move away from Gnome a little bit more and create their desktop. So the only dislike that I've had with Pop! OS is I've had problems with it on my laptop, meaning that I left the laptop running, and when I close the lid on a typical laptop, it puts it to sleep. Well, Pop! OS wouldn't wake up, and I tried it numerous times, and it's either Pop! OS or it's an incompatibility with my laptop with Pop! OS. I haven't had that issue with other distributions. So I have to think that Pop! OS for some reason doesn't like my laptop. I didn't investigate it to see how to fix it, but I moved on. So I poked around with KDE-Neon a little bit, and the reason I was attracted to KDE-Neon is because it's KDE, and I found it real simple to install. Again, it's based on Debian and Ubuntu. It, unlike other distributions, only comes with the Plasma desktop. But it is customizable because it is a Plasma desktop. You can change your looks, your backgrounds, your settings, your keyboard shortcuts. And I've only used KDE-Neon in a virtual machine. And as I put here, my jury is still out. I don't have enough experience to know if I don't like it. I have not installed it on hardware. It's only installed in a virtual machine. I also tried Zorin OS, and I like Zorin a lot. It's a very good software store. I was able to download a lot of different apps for Zorin that I was not able to download, for example, with Debian directly. It's pretty customizable. It looks a lot like Windows 11, as you can see here, with this particular desktop theme that I chose on this machine at Windows 11,10, I guess, because that's an option as well. It works well on older hardware. I have installed it on older hardware, not just a virtual machine. And I like it. And I put my dislikes as difficult to customize shortcuts. It's based on Gnome. So Gnome in general, I've found, me personally, I've found it hard to customize different options. This was an experiment. I don't know if any of you have heard of NixOS, but it's really a unique distribution. It's very customizable during installation. And what I mean by that is when you boot the ISO, it comes up with 3 icons on your desktop. One is the command line, one is the help guide, and one is a browser. And so what you need to do for NixOS is you need to open the command line and configure how you're going to install it. So it's all command line driven, and you create a basically a configuration file to install whatever software you tell it to install on that in that configuration file. And then you tell it build the configuration file, and it boots, and you have whatever desktop you want, whatever apps you want, and it just runs. I found it to be very stable. It's rollback friendly, meaning that when you create a new customization file and build it, it keeps the old one. So if you blew up your machine and it doesn't boot, you can just reboot the machine and say, use my old desktop or use my old configuration file, and up it comes. So, you know, the worst that'll happen is it doesn't boot and you have to start over and figure out why it didn't boot. I have installed it with Xfce, Gnome, and Plasma, all 3 at separate times. As you can see in the picture here, this particular build is KDE-Plasma. My dislikes are, this is definitely not beginner friendly. There is no installer. Like I said, it's all command line driven. And I found it difficult to customize the user environment. And there's a lot of reading, a steep learning curve. So if you're interested in a challenge, this is a fun way to go. So my latest endeavor is MX with the Plasma desktop, MX Linux. It's also based on Debian. It has a large quantity of MX tools that comes with it, which I really like. My favorite one is called MX Snapshot, which allows you to create an ISO of your working machine. And you can save that ISO off to your flash drive, stick it in another machine and boot that ISO and create your new machine with all the settings and tools and desktop and as well as apps that you've installed and you like. So what I did is I created a layout that I liked, and this, like I said, Plasma in this case, added some apps that I wanted, like Chromium, for example, and then created a flash drive with it, an ISO, put it on a flash drive and install it on my laptop, on my separate laptop. So I've only recently started playing with MX, probably a couple of weeks is about all I have into this. And you know, part of this couple of weeks has also been putting together this presentation. So I don't have a whole lot of experience, although I've found it very stable. I haven't had any issues with it at all. And my dislikes, not so far. So I thought really this is enough talking, and I really need to show you how to how I found these operating systems to use. So I think you should be able to see my virtual machine desktop at this point. Is that true, John? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm using a virtual machine. I'm not using VirtualBox. I'm using something called Proxmox, and it runs on a separate computer, and I'm logged into it via a web page. And these are my virtual machines that I have installed on this machine right now. Pop! OS, Debian Xfce, which you see here, Debian KDE, Elementary OS, MX Linux, Ubuntu Budgie, anyway, all of these. So I thought I would show you a couple of these. So I'm ready to log into Debian Xfce. And just like I showed you in that picture and the image, it has applications down here at the bottom. Actually, I should be able to make this full screen. Is that a little easier to see? Hopefully. So, you know, it has the typical applications that come with most Linux distros, for instance, LibreOffice. It has a lot of system options here. It also has the settings, like Synaptic Package Manager, for example. That's how you would install most of the packages in this version of Linux. Again, because it's Debian, it's somewhat limited, but I think Synaptic Package Manager allows you to add PPAs. I'm not sure. Cal would probably know that. I went through and I created 4 virtual desktops. So if I open an app in desktop 4, as you can see, and now I switch to desktop 1, which again I do with keyboard shortcuts, you can see that I have something different on this desktop. I go back to 4, or you can see I can switch to 3. You can also click on them and switch. I find it pretty easy to use. If you're interested in the basics of Linux and you have a somewhat limited machine to run it on, this is a good choice. Let's escape out of this one. Let's try a different one. Let's go to elementary. Elementary I like because it's a beautiful desktop. Come on, wake up. It's still asleep. There it goes. And just like the picture I showed you, it's got the dock across the bottom. It also has the applications button on the top here, which is the same as well, no, that's the multitasking view. I took the applications button off of here. So this is basically what it comes with, including system settings, which is also down here, and the store, which is down here. And this is a very generic installation. I haven't done anything with it. Now to switch desktops like I did in Xfce, this is the multitasking view, as they call it. And it shows up over here and you have to click on it to switch. I find that a little frustrating because I have to click 3 times in order to move from one window to another. So if I bring up the terminal, for example, and then I want to bring up something else in a different view, I have to click and click. However, you can also click on the app itself once it's open. Let's let the browser open up here. So, and it opened full screen. Oh, there we go. So the dock went away, but I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little dot at the bottom of each of the apps that I have open, and you can click on that app, for example, and it'll switch to it once you have it open. So when an app is open, it puts it down here on the dock, even though it doesn't live down here, which is kind of nice. Again, it's a simple desktop to install and fairly easy to run. And if you're a mouse person, it works just great. Then I'm going to show you Zorin. So this is the same desktop that I showed you a picture of. And what I wanted to show you here is the dock is down here again, and I added ungoogled Chromium. It comes with Firefox. Here's your settings, here's the store, and here's your menu. Again, it shows you all the apps that are installed. One of them is the Zorin Appearance app, which allows you to change your desktops. And right now we are using this view, which is kind of Windows 11-ish. But if you wanted to go back to the standard menu, now you have a regular button with words. I was, again, being a shortcut person, I was not able to figure out how to get this to extend like system tools. Now I see system tools, but I had to click on it twice to get here. I find that frustrating for day-to-day use, which is why I have it set this way, because it pops up and has everything right here. I don't have to click around to find it. I found Zorin to be very stable and pretty easy to use. I added GIMP to it, and it was pretty easy from the store. Let's see here. We can open the store, and if you don't see it in the list, you can search for it. So, for example, if you wanted, oh, I don't know, how about Genie, a text editor. Uh-oh, didn't like something. Well, there it is, though. It says it was an error, but it really wasn't an error. Okay. So anyway, so you just type in the name of the app you want if you didn't see it in the list, and then you can click on it to install it. You also can explore, which is what we had in the opening window, and then this shows you your installed apps that you currently have. Now these are the ones in different distributions do it differently, but this one just shows you the ones that came installed that are extra. So let me close this, and then I'm going to show you MX Linux as well. Again, this is one I've just started using. And I'm pretty pleased. Again, this is KDE because like I said in the beginning, I like the KDE environment. I like the way they do things, the way they manage their shortcuts, the way they manage their apps. And this just pops up, and I left it so that it would show every time. But they have a bunch of stuff that you can do right here, right at the beginning when you first install it. So here are my 4 desktops, and as you can see, I've created shortcuts for them. I can move from one desktop to another, and you can see right now we're on desktop 4. So if I open system settings in desktop 4 and go back to 1, you'll see that I have the welcome screen. I mentioned earlier that one of my favorite tools is the oh, now I can't remember what it's called. Not Codex installer. Snapshot tool. And where is it? It's here somewhere.
Right down there at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, MX Snapshot. There we go. And because it's going to mess with the system, it needs my password. As somebody said earlier, when you, well, no, that was before we started the meeting. I'm trying to be root here in order to install or run a package that messes around with the system environment. So it's going to switch me to root and needs my password. So basically, you go through these settings here, and this is what the snapshot is going to be called. And you can see it's an ISO. And you can pick what you want to exclude from the build. So for example, if you have a bunch of music already on this system, and you don't want that to be part of your ISO, you would check the music folder, and it would now exclude that from your build, as well as VirtualBox, because, for instance, you might have all those virtual machines ready to go. So I'm not going to start it because I don't want to run this right now, but and it takes a little while to build the ISO, but then you have it. Let me cancel this, and I'll open the file browser, and if I back up one screen here to the home directory, in the home directory, it creates a snapshot folder for you, and that's where my ISO is when I created this on 212. So again, you would drag this to a flash drive, and there you are, ready to install on another machine. There are, like I said, there is a lot of tools with MX that allow you to do a whole bunch of stuff that's not included by default on a lot of other distros. I don't know what most of these are yet. I haven't played with them, but this one's pretty self-explanatory. A live USB maker. You'd probably take the snapshot and put it on that, use that tool to create it. That's really about what I wanted to share with you today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them for you. I'll unshare my screen here. Let's see here. Unshare. So there we go. That's what I had for you today.
A great tour.
Absolutely. It gives you an overview of a lot of things that are out there. And I know there's at least one group that is looking for a good alternative to offer its members who can't or don't want to move up to Windows 11.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones I showed you today, I would be fine with using any of them except for Nix, which is very difficult to install. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. You just plug in the ISO and tell it to boot, and pretty soon you have a machine. Now, you know, a lot of this stuff you can put on a flash drive individually, and there are also tools which I think we've talked about in one of these meetings, like Ventoy, that allow you to put many ISOs on one flash drive, as long as it's big enough, to try out many different live versions of these distributions.
You know, and as we've said, one of the big things about Linux is choices, and distro hopping is a way that you can try to find, you know, what is the perfect fit. And a lot of you know that I do a lot of my presentations relating to cars, and that's why we go to different car lots and try out cars. We get in them, we drive them, we see how we feel in them, and then we pick the one that we like the best of all of those out there. And the same thing, you know, Dave did a great job of showing, here's what I like, but then, oh, I didn't like this, so I'm going to go look at a different one.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be very pleased with MX. That's kind of like one of mine. But I was using the MX Xfce, the original version.
Yeah, and I looked at that too, but only real quickly because I really like the KDE way of doing things. Now, I purposely left off Linux Mint because you did such a great presentation last month. I saw no reason to cover the similar ground.
Well, Cal's going to be talking about software today, so we're going to get a good bit on that. And then I'm going to be talking about the command line, or not the command line, no, the control panel and stuff.
Perfect.
So good. Well, we'll see. Go ahead, Judy.
I just get a kick out of it because we were brought up in the same group, okay, since what, 1987 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were shortcut people all the way from the beginning of time. We did shortcuts. And I find there are so many people out in the world that wouldn't know a shortcut if it bit them in the nose. And my contention is my fingers never leave the keyboard. So I type extremely fast and I just keep going without having to move my hand someplace else. But I love to hear you talk about shortcuts.
Well, which is
Hank was saying, stuck with us.
Yeah, similar to me, Judy. I mean, you and I are saying the same thing. If I don't have to use the mouse, I prefer to just keep my hands on the keyboard and just keep going.
I have a question here. Can you say a bit about Proxmox?
Yeah, I thought about that, but because that's a presentation in its own, I didn't say very much at all. Proxmox is a piece of software. It is a hypervisor type 1, a type 1 hypervisor, which means it's installed directly on the hardware. It is not like VirtualBox, which is installed on Linux or Windows. And the down thing about Proxmox is you have to have a separate machine. You don't want to put it on your daily use machine because you log into it from a web page. It installs just like any other Linux distro, and it is Linux based, by the way. It's Debian based, my favorite branch of Linux. And when it installs, you get a command line looking screen that says, go to another computer and log into this IP address. And there you go. Now Proxmox is running. And then you have to do a bunch of reading about how to create virtual machines and your storage location, where to keep them. We could do that as a presentation some other time, but it's pretty involved.
We will do that. Thank you.
I think he just committed to that.
Oh, gosh, I have it down here.
I didn't mean to do that.
But I know where to find him too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the same line, about presentations, Dave mentioned, and I'm the same way, that we are more comfortable in the Debian family tree. I would love for someone who is a Fedora person or an Arch person to do a presentation and just give us the ideas of how is it different. It's still Linux, but there are differences in the way it works and such. So if any of you are a Fedora user or an Arch user and would be willing to do part of a workshop, we could do half Fedora, half Arch or something like that. And of course, there are a few other family trees, not as popular maybe. So any of you who are non-Debian, we'd love to have you step up to the plate and hit a home run with us.
That would be awesome.
Absolutely. And is Nix related to the Nix Tools video editor?
No, not the video editor. The Nix family, Nix OS and Nix itself is a app tool. So you would run Nix within Nix OS to load other apps. And it is an independent distro. It's not based on Arch or Debian or Fedora or anything. It's on its own. It has a pretty healthy community, but it's way up there in level of understanding of Linux.
And Bob from Sun City Center, did that help answer any of your questions about what you're looking for? And tell us a little bit about what you have done with what you think your members might like. Can you unmute him, John?
Who are we talking about?
Bob, Domedia SCC Computer Club.
I see him. I've asked him to unmute.
There he is. I see him now. He's talking, but I don't hear him.
Yeah, it says he's
If you
unmuted.
turn the microphone on.
There you go.
Yeah, we're looking at different possibilities because with the with Windows 10, the demise of Windows 10 in a couple of years, a large portion of our membership will not be able to upgrade to 11 or cannot afford to buy a new computer to upgrade to 11. So we're looking at other alternatives, and one of them is elementary. And for beginner novice users, I've looked at elementary, and it's just straightforward. It just works. There's very little in there you can get yourself in trouble with.
I agree.
Whereas some of the other operating system, some of the other distros like Ubuntu or you can go down a rabbit hole and create all kinds of problems. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I think elementary is so locked down. You have to really work at it to go mess something up. The only thing I didn't like, well, besides the flexibility, is the fact that it had the buttons on the left-hand side instead of the right-hand side. If your people are willing to adapt, should I say, to the buttons being on the left like a Mac, you're good.
Oh, you mean
Like
open, minimize, maximize, and close?
Correct. And typically in elementary, it has a maximize and a close, and I think that's it. You have to download tools in order to add the minimize button as well.
Yeah, what I did was I put, I created an ISO. I added a few features. I put LibreOffice in there. I added Chrome, Zoom, and added a couple of other things in there to make it more comfortable, and then created an ISO for it. And I've been letting the other monitors try it out.
Cool.
And see what I can come up with for, you know, I wish it had this, or I wish it had that. So I can add in and take out some features as necessary.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the command line and doing that sort of thing then?
Yeah, I've been playing with Linux for many years.
Okay, then, so you can customize it to your user's desires. That sounds great.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is get an ISO that's out, that would be available, that I could give it to some of our other monitors, and they would be able to put it on other people's machines and, you know, show them the basics of using it.
Yeah,
Give them the all-in-one package, a complete distribution that they can say, here it is.
and then you'd know exactly what's on that distribution. So when you need to help somebody, you know exactly what it is.
Right.
And
Sound
he added a whole bunch more apps than what he mentioned. It's time for us to move on, but Bob, I hope this helped you, and that lets everybody else listening and watching know what one group is doing to help its members, and giving them some place where they can do one-stop shopping and go on with their lives with probably very little downtime or learning curve. Back to you, John.
Okay, great. Good start for our presentations. We're going to switch over. Did you have one more, Dave?
Yeah, I had one more comment there. I think the fact that he's doing those modifications, Bob is doing those modifications and creating an ISO for his members, I think that's awesome. And maybe something like that would be a presentation we could do also.
That's good.
Anyway.
Good thought, Bob.
Yeah, yay.
I'm
All right,
volunteering, Bob.
All right, we're going to switch over to Cal. Cal's from the Cajun Clickers. You know, Dave's from Judy, so I didn't need to mention that, from Santa Clarita out there at the west. Cal's going to be talking to us today about software management and a whole bunch of good stuff there. So Cal, it's yours.
Okay. Let me share.
Ooh, cool.
Okay, and my talk today is default software for Linux Mint and what to expect from a brand new system. And I guess my audience today is for new to Linux, and to contrast it to what Dave has been talking about, I'm going to talk about one distro on bare metal. And I've used it to repurpose many old computers for members of the club who don't want to switch to 11 or whatever. And that's what we use instead of, say, elementary. And I would comment that elementary, that's what's called an immutable operating system. So, you know, that's why you can't mess it up. But I found Linux Mint a viable alternative for people who want to completely convert their old computer. And the question is, why do we use Linux? And that is to do things. instead of just finding out all the different ways to options we have, we really want to get certain things done. And the way we do this is with software. And as you've seen over all of our presentations, the software is free, doesn't cost anything, it's easy to get, and you've got lots of choices, and some people would say too many. So the way I introduce this to our members is kind of a simpler approach. And so what I'm going to do today is to show you, if you just plug in Linux Mint, what is there, and then look at my system and what might you add. And today, and as we go along, what I'm looking at is taking the default distro and just adding more software, adding more apps to meet your personal needs. Because you may not always, everybody that might have the same personal needs. And there's lots of other things we can do, but Don and Orv and everybody, that we can talk about it in future workshops. So to go back, Linux software is distributed in packages. And to make it easy, we have a graphics interface package managers. So no command line here, no shortcut keys here. This is a different approach. And as we've been talking about the Debian family, Debian, Ubuntu, and Mint all use the same underlying package manager, the dynamic packaging. And if you were to go over to say Arch, you would use Pacman. Fedora, you would use Red Hat, RPM, Red Hat Package Manager. So those are kind of the big differences. So everything I've seen here today, more or less, well, there was a couple that were Pacman based. And the approach I take is that instead of knowing all about, here's all the software writers, instead of knowing all about that, we can let a distribution handle it for us. Mint's very good at that. Elementary is very good for that. A couple others. So take the pain out of it. And if you want special software, you can get containers. And in Mint, we use Flatpaks. The other popular container is Snaps. But in this case, you just go get it individually because it's all packaged and simple. The normal method is somewhat complex. And that's what we were talking about elementary if you didn't want to do it. But Mint has lots of tools, so you don't have to dig too deep and minimizes the chance of error. So distributions, the whole idea of a distribution is to have a system that works. There's lots of pieces that have to be put together. And so that out of the box, when you stick that USB drive and install it, it just works. And it's got enough default apps for you to start and learn the system. So what we have is the Linux kernel, which everybody has a kernel, that is the interface between the hardware and the software. It's the traffic cop. Then we have the operating system and utilities, that's sort of all the administration. And then we have the desktop. Now Dave's going over, you know, all various desktops, which is just the way you get to all of this. And Mint has its own desktop. And then there's some apps that are added. And the apps that are chosen are based on the software's goals, their reason to be, their target audience. And generally they try to put a minimum amount, not a maximum amount. They know you can go get software. So you can add from a very large list. So that's the step you take. If it's easy to get to add more apps, then they have a base system that looks the same to everyone. So here's a Linux Mint desktop. All your applications, of course, run in the main window. And Mint has their panel at the bottom, just like Windows. So it's common for Windows, although you can move it around. And it has the application starter. And it uses the menu the classic menu system. And you can pin your favorites here to the dock. You notice that Dave showed somewhere the dock is in the middle. Ubuntu has it on the left side. And then there's the system tray. We're all familiar from Windows. And this is just your basic volume, battery levels, and so forth. But the main thing is, how do you get software? And Mint has provided a very good software manager. And Mint has already precompiled a bunch of software, and they also use the Ubuntu precompiled software. So you don't have to do any work. And they'll give you, there's some advertisement, they give you what's popular. And of course, you can search by name in the search bar. But the way we generally in Linux do things is we kind of categorize them. So I want you to look at these categories like accessories, internet, office, and that's how you, since there's so many titles of software, you get to smaller and smaller piles. Mint, unlike just about any other distribution I've seen, separates its containers, which it uses Flatpak, from all the other software. So all this software is done in the classic dynamic style, whereas this is done in the container style. Most other distros, they combine them, and then when you go to a particular software application, you can pick, if there are two choices, you can pick if you want the container or if you want the classic build. So here in the case, if you pick this category, in Mint, you also have subcategories, again, to help you find what you want. If you wanted photography or if you wanted scanning, they would give you a smaller list, more targeted to your search. Then as you click on each one, it will give you a list of available software and give you an idea of what people think about it. And to install it, you simply double click on this, and then there'll be a page which describes your software, and you just push a button and it gets installed. So here you will get out of the box, what does Mint come with? And here's the program launcher, and it shows you all the software that you can pick that's already there. And I'm going to talk about these categories right here. And then I have my own setup, which I've added things. So I'll show you that also. And you'll see my setup will be with a dark screen, and the stock will be with a light screen. So dark on light, dark print on light, or light print on dark, just to distinguish. Now, when you look at these two, first thing you're going to notice is that I have 3 more categories than the stock. The reason is because the categories are not supplied, not displayed, unless you've actually added software in that category. And I assume if you get rid of it, it'll go away. So here is the accessories category, and it goes down, and you have to scroll down to get this. And it's just like Windows has a bunch of accessories, Mac has a bunch of accessories. And you'll notice, for instance, the file manager, and the file manager can be found in various places. So you can get to lots of these things different ways. You can get to them with short keys, however you want. You can type in the search bar. But here are the ones that come with the system. And I only want to talk about a couple. One is I use a lot because I do a lot of hardware installation on bare metal. And I want to know what's there. And it has a very good idea of here's how I partition my drives, what it is, how full it is. So if somebody comes with a computer, I can analyze what is going on. Also, it has a standard file manager. And if you notice, just like anybody, virtually, when you get a new system, it will set up the basic folders for you to put normal stuff. And sometimes the software will default to putting, if you download something and it doesn't ask you where to put it, it will by default put it in downloads, etc. If you have music, it will by default put it in music. One thing I use a lot is a screenshot. A screenshot system comes with it. And if you want to make a new Linux distribution to put on somebody, you can format the drive, and it has a very good method to write the image to the stick. So if I want to give somebody a copy of Linux Mint, all I need is a USB stick, and I can write it to the USB stick, and they can install it. So it's a good way to make bootable media. I've used it for years, and it's very good. Now, there's some education apps. I'll put a couple here. Here I show that this is astronomy software, and this is packaged in the standard way, and Mint tells you if you got the flat pack. So I have two versions, one that was a container and one which is the standard approach. I've also added some games, some kind of simple games. So here is the graphics, and it's not a whole bunch of graphics that comes with it. Drawing is a part of LibreOffice. Their document scanner that comes with it is not very good. And Pix is to see pictures. My system, you can see I've added quite a few. Inkscape, paint drawing, expand. So it's necessary to add a lot of software because they didn't show too much. I'll show you their Pix. Their Pix, all it does is just show you the metadata for your picture and show you your picture. No editing and so forth. But never fear, there are tons of other photo editors that you can use. GIMP is a very popular. Darktable is like Lightroom and so forth. You want raw images. The one I recommend to people for a good balance between power and simplicity is Digicam. That's part of the KDE system. And that shows you can also put KDE software on, this is a Gnome software version. So all of that KDE is available to you. And the KDE desktop or the Gnome desktop or the Cinnamon desktop, that's an option based on your style preference. There's also Bitmap drawing software. Here I've just put a few examples. So what I tell people, when you want to know what software, just go on do an internet search and say 20 best Linux software packages for blah, and then put in the blank which you're looking for. Here we have internet, which is pretty straightforward. Firefox is their default browser. In my system, I've also added the Chromium browser, which is the free software version of Chrome. I've also added Dropbox, cloud storage. This is how to log into other computers. And of course, you have to have Zoom. How else could I be talking to you today? Office, pretty standard. LibreOffice is the base of just about every Office software for most people I've seen. With lightweight distributions, they'll not put LibreOffice. And you can put LibreOffice on Windows, so it's a pretty standard choice. Here I've only added a couple things. One is GNU Cache, which is a sort of QuickBooks alternative, and a couple others just for my own choice. Programming, I only program in Python, so here are some Python editors that you use. Sound and video. Now there's only a few here, and I'm going to talk about these three: celluloid, hypnotics, and rhythm box in a moment. Just like graphics, there's a lot more that you could take from the software store or repository. A long time, here again, this is a bunch of KDE for DVD writing, screen videos, and movie editing. So KDE, instead of having to install all the KDE stuff, I just a few of the ones I like. And there's a couple other ones. But let's talk about what comes out of the box. If you want to look at a movie, or if you want to hear something that's on the internet, and you've downloaded the file, you need a player and to play them. And they've come up, their player is celluloid. Notice it is based on MPV, which is a Gnome app. They also have Hypnotics, which you could, if you want to look at TV in various places. Well, some of them you have to be in their country. So if you use a VPN, you can make like you're in a country, like Italy and Britain are pretty hard on this. But it's pretty interesting with the pandemic. If you go to Australia and Canada to see how they're dealing with it, get their take on it. There's also some movies down here, which is basically if people go out on the internet, it's Pluto. And if you have music that you own, that you have on your own system, and you want to make playlists and tag them genre and so forth, Rhythm Box is kind of the iTunes of the Linux world. Administration, pretty much, I don't add too much. Here you can see the tools. It has a backup tool, driver managers. Here, this is from the ISO to install it, so it's got that. And it goes on and on. A few I'd point out is that the printers, the update manager, and the system reports will show up in the system tray at the bottom panel. If you need an update on the bottom panel that Dave showed, they'll have a little dot on this icon. Printers, this is where you would configure your printer. And system reports, if something goes wrong that it doesn't like, it normally won't show up, but if you have a problem, it will alert you to the problem. Also, a couple things, system monitor and terminal. I find the system monitor, this is Windows, I forget what it is, if you want to see what's running, all the processes running. But another thing, it shows you most computers today have multiple CPU cores. So here you can see how the CPU cores are working. And if you can see your traffic coming in and out of the internet, in case somebody takes over your system and tries to do data mining on it. And of course, every good Linux distribution has its command line tool. So essentially, this is what I've used to convert people to a simple system. It's very configurable, but it has tools to configure it, which gives you an extra safety and extra makes it easy. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Again, a presentation that covers everything, and there aren't any questions in the chat box. You're on, John.
Yeah, one of the comments that I would make is that, as we say in Linux, there are so many options. And as Cal pointed out, he installs a number of KDE software that he likes. And you've already heard that Dave said he likes the KDE desktop best. So the trick comes, how many of those KDE programs do you really like? as to when do you finally say, I'm just going to go to the KDE desktop environment so I have all those programs, or do I only want a few of them? One of the little drawbacks can be that with the Dolphin, which is the file manager for KDE, when you install it, it installs a whole bunch of the KDE stuff to your computer. Whereas with Digicam, it mostly just does the program and doesn't change your computer that much. So, you know, what happens if you do too many KDEs, you kind of got a hybrid program. You're a combination of a Gnome or an Xfce and a KDE. So you just kind of have to decide how much do you want? When does it make it just more sense to go to the, you know, KDE by itself? But I love the options that you can have by putting other things on there. Dave?
One of the questions I would have for Cal is when you've installed those KDE programs like Kdenlive or whatever, did you have to do that from the command line, or is that available in the store because it's a KDE app?
No, it's in the store.
Okay, so it's simple for people to install.
It's simple. Yeah, my view is I get lost in KDE and I find it, I can never go back to where I started. I find Mint's a lot simpler interface for people to learn and for me to remember. And I can get the KDE or the Gnome apps out of the store.
Yeah, perfect.
And unless there's a reason for you not to have some of the KDE coding mixed in with your other desktop, you know, you just have to understand that you no longer are a purist with a set desktop. You've been adding some things to that.
You're a Linux desktop.
Yeah, you're right. All right.
I do have a question. Do most of the added programs have manual pages? I'm taking that to be how to do this, that, and the other thing.
No. The man pages are a command line. So generally you go on the internet to find out, or that the concept is they're intuitive. Just like if you get a Windows program, how do you learn a Windows program? Command line, man pages are for command line, and generally for the parameters, you know, the thousands of dashed such and such.
Okay.
Some of them do have a help page, but as people found out in Windows, the printed manual of how to is gone. It used to be on a CD, it's gone. And most of the time you do internet. How do you work this, or what kind of a problem if you can't figure it out yourself on that?
And Larry Fortness said he has an opinion, and there he is.
And
John's unmuting you, so to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just my comments. Our little club, we had a Windows computer at our clubhouse for any of our 700 homes residents could use. And during the time that we had a Windows computer there, one of us was having to go down and fix something probably on a weekly basis. And we got tired of that, and we took Windows off and we put Linux on. We put Linux Ubuntu originally on it. And later we went with Linux Mint 20.3 Uno. And we've not had but maybe one call in the last 2 years since we put the Linux system in the clubhouse. And one of the ladies that used to use it all the time, I gave her a laptop with Linux Mint on it so that she didn't have to come down to the clubhouse all the time. And you know, I'm not disrespect for this lady, but she is dumb as a box of rocks. And she has used that computer for, since I gave it to her, I think I might have gotten called 2, maybe 3 times to go down and get her out of a bind. And to me, that speaks volumes for Linux, for the seniors that we have in our community. They're able to browse the internet and do the types of things that's not complicated, far less complicated than, say, Windows. So we have put it on quite a few folks' laptops here in the community.
Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, had to make sure the mic was down. All right, so we will now switch. Orv probably would have been here to do a little bit of advanced stuff, but he's laying on his back somewhere. The last part that I'm going to share with you is kind of continuation from for Judy, because she's always asking, well, what is that like in Windows? And so today I thought I would take a little time to talk about the control panel settings or whatever. And so I'm going to move to my other computer and wake it up. Good. All right, and I'm going to share it. What's neat about having another computer, third one, I can see exactly what's being shared. All right, I am going to be using Mint, kind of a theme here, but before I do that, and this is the same kind of a keyboard shortcut like Cal or Dave was talking about, only this one runs through a very similar program, just like Windows, to go through my open desktops instead of my open programs. Many different names, and Bill and I have had a talk about that. With Windows, there was one thing, so there's one name. With Linux, there are multiple, so there are multiple names. So we've got control panel, we've got control center, we've got a settings, and a new one that I'm going to show you is called hub. Now, to go from a starting basis, this we all can see is our old beloved control panel that goes way back. And it pretty much stayed the same for a long time. Microsoft did say, okay, we're going to change it. And they came up with the one where everything was in categories. And a lot of people didn't like that. And so there was the button that you could change it and go back to that, which for some people, having all of your options in like an alphabetical order made it easier. With this system, you had to kind of figure out, okay, what I'm trying to do, what category would it be in? And I just noticed that on the Windows 11 computer, that when you go to settings, it only has the categories and no description of what's under it. And to me, that's going to make it harder, because if I want to do something and I'm not quite sure where, at least with this system that Windows 10 and back had, you sort of kind of knew what which area you wanted to go to. So what I want to do now is I want to take you on just some quick tours. I don't expect you maybe to be able to read everything, to show you that because of the open sourceness of Linux, everybody has their ideas about how something should be set up. And the same happens for the the settings menu And this is going to show you just there's some variety. The other thing to note is that some developers feel that you should only be able to change certain things. Other developers said, we're going to give you tons of things that you can change. KDE is one of them. So if you're a person that doesn't like to do a lot of customizing or changes, you might feel more comfortable with a distro desktop that only gives you a few. Or if you really go, you want the strong one. Oh, there's the Windows 10 one. I'm sorry. That was the old one. There's Windows 10. And then the Windows 11, the categories were down the side with no description as to what's underneath that. All right. So this is a Gnome or Gnome. We'll have an argument until the end of time as to how you're supposed to pronounce it. And I just don't really care. It's not worth that much work. But you can see that these are categories, no descriptions. I cut it because it's so long, and you get quite a lot. Now, interesting, a number of years ago, Ubuntu was pretty bad with giving you a lot of settings to make changes to. They only felt, well, you only need to do these few things. So thanks to open source, people went out and created add-on applications. It was called tweaks, and there was a Gnome tweaks, and then there was a Ubuntu or a Unity tweaks that increased the number. More recently, the Gnome team has gone back to giving you quite a lot. Here's Dave's favorite, KDE. And this is on his. I didn't know this at the time that he was using MX KDE, but this is what looks very familiar to him. And you can see has lots of different settings. And when you go to the settings, you get subsettings. So the desktop behavior, there's a whole bunch of choices. Or if you go to the network settings, you can see that there's a whole bunch of settings. So quite a lot of choices here. And I also agree with Cal in that KDE has so much that you definitely can get lost in trying to customize and get back. But I do like some of the KDE software. We showed you the elementary. This is the elementary settings, and you'll notice that I put in the numbers at the top. For example, KDE had 25 different categories. Gnome had 23, but Pantheon with the elementary, that's all. I can fit it all on one screen. So there are some settings in the other ones that you don't get, but if you're talking about a software or an operating system for beginners, they won't get lost in doing things. Now, Peppermint is another one of the newer ones that we've talked a lot about being good for new users and stuff. And they have a unique approach with a hub. And the hub is one hub with 3 different tabs at the top. So I've got a screenshot for each. And so they let you first go to the hub, look for what kind of things, whether it's something the user would do, hardware and network or system, and then you can pick that so you can see. Then when you go to that, you go on to some other categories. They have 12, and then they can go to a separate one for more settings and have another 19. So they've got quite a lot, but they make it easier saying, here are the most common ones that you would do and go with that. And so here's the next one. Also, notice on this one that Peppermint will allow you to access both Snap, which is a Ubuntu, the Flat Hub, which is more or less Mint, and then the third independent one, which is the App Image, so that you can get software plus the one for Gnome. And then if you go to their subsetting, which looks more like the other ones, there are more, and a couple of them are duplicates. But I want to go back and just jump on a side thing to talk about Peppermint and what happens when people, developers get ideas. Peppermint used to be one that was really recommended for new users. It looked good. It was easy to do. But after the Linux meeting with that CFCS, yeah, and Brookdale had together, we looked at this, the Peppermint. And so I said, I'm going to do that with my group, and looked at it. And I was very surprised to find out that I can no longer recommend this for a new user, because when you installed the Peppermint operating system, everything is not there. In fact, when you go to hit that, as Cal showed you, go to the Internet tab for your software, there were no browsers in the beginning. If you did the tap for Office, the only thing you had in there was a like the old-fashioned note-taking app, the very, very plain one, like a typewriter. So you would have to go in, and before you could do much of anything else, you had to go into a program and add your browsers, so you could have access to that. Plus, you'd have to go ahead and add like LibreOffice, so you had some, excuse me a second. You'd have to add your own Office. Then you'd go to the software store, and there was no software store. You had to go and download these GNOME store or the Snap store. So I downloaded the GNOME store, and when I opened it up, and you saw in Cal's demonstration what the GNOME store is supposed to look like, it was totally blank. I did find out if I typed in something, then it showed up. But the biggest problem with beginners is they don't know what they want. So unfortunately, on the side, I would have to say that unless they go back to making it a little bit easier for beginners, this would be one that's not as difficult as the Nix OS, but it's not as simple as the other ones. All right, if we go to Linux Lite, which is probably one of the best ones to recommend for newbies, lots of choices on here. You get to see 38 different ones. And I'm not expecting you to try to really look at these. I'm just showing you that there are so many options. Here's the Xfce desktop in a Manjaro, which is an Arch-based. And you can see still a lot of different choices and options in different categories. Manjaro also has a separate one for just Manjaro settings, not Xfce. So there were some added ones for that. Ubuntu has its own version of Mate, which is the one I'm going to be demonstrating a little bit later. And you can see that they put theirs into categories. And then from that, it's easy to find what you're trying to look for. Cinnamon, which is what Cal was doing, gives you quite a lot of options, 42 different of these categories, also broken down into the categories and options. Cinnamon has more choices than Mate, but some of the choices in Cinnamon are not in Mate, and vice versa, which is interesting that this is Mint. 3 different versions of Mint, 3 different development teams of what they like. In Cinnamon, they have what you can see on the screen, applets and desklets and extensions, which aren't really found in Mate. That's all the development. And Cinnamon even had one called for a graphics tablet setup. And what I'm going to look at in depth is the one for Mate, and it categorized things in a little bit different order: administration first, and then hardware, internet, look and feel, and personal. And there were a few things in here that weren't in Cinnamon. So it's really basically it's the desktop environment people that kind of determine what their settings are going to offer. And so we're going to go take a look at those right now. And through the wonder of desktops. So here's the control center, as they call it, for Linux Mint. And this is the Mate version. And I'm going to go through and we'll take some look at specific tools. Some of them, you know, Cal showed because he likes those as special ones. One of the things that they have is a backup tool that you would not find exactly in probably Windows. This backup tool is to store or to back up just your data, your personal data, and it doesn't back up your whole computer, because for the most part in Linux, it is an install that is so quick, I don't worry about backing up my whole image. I back up my data, and the data I have is always on a separate partition or a separate drive, depending on what you have. And so you just, you know, click this one and say you want to back up now, and all you do is say where. So it's just going to back up all of your home folder with all the files that are in there. And you just tell it where to back up to. So you can back it up to a thumb drive or a separate partition or a separate external hard drive if you want. But that backs up just your, I don't think it'll work right now. Let me just do that because, yeah. So then you go to say exactly what do I want. And so you can tell what folders and what files, and just like that Cal said, you know, you or Dave did, you would probably not want to back up all your virtual images because they are huge files, but you can choose. Now, the other thing that is very unique in this is that I can back up my list of software that I've installed. And as you can see, these probably are all the ones I installed that did not come with the original Mint Mate. And as Cal showed you, you know, he marked which ones he added. If he reinstalls his Cinnamon Mint, he'll only get the basic files that came with it. I can make a backup of all of the files that I have added myself. And you can see right there at the bottom, there's Zoom. And then after I've reinstalled, I can use this same tool to add those programs all back at, you know, in one big swoop. And so that is a real excellent program and backup tools. Login window. Login window, and again, here's that requiring administration. It's kind of a neat tool because I can make changes to that very first screen that you see. And just for fun, you know, you can make a lot of changes to it. You can put a different background on it. On my one computer, I have, instead of a Linux Mint logo, I've got a nice picture of a pasture scene with a fence or something like that. But that's kind of neat that you can change it to make look and make it personal. That's under the login window. And you can also control which users have to log in with password, which can't, and then a few more settings. But that's not something I don't think I've seen unless there's an add-on on the Windows side to be able to take care of making changes. Of course, the printer, he showed you the software manager. Synaptic is just what I consider the middle ground between command line and the software store. It's the older way where we would just go through and pick what you want through the category or program. And Synaptic also will say, you wanted this package, but you also need these other packages to go with it. And so that's kind of like the second in-between layer. I wanted to show, oh, and then printers. Maybe it's just with me, but no printers. Okay, so I'm just going to click a button and I'm going to say, let's check with the there. It doesn't show because I did not turn on my network printer, but if I had it turned on, it would find it. I have had very little trouble adding printers. A lot of times they get automatically added, but this is where you come, and that's very much similar to the printer things in Windows. The system report that Cal mentioned, this is kind of nice because right now it's doing a systems check. Let's see if I've had any problems. Nope, no problems. Did have a crash report. My pCloud crashed because I didn't log in. System information. This is where you can come and find out everything you wanted to know about your computer and didn't. Windows has a very limited one that talks about what version you're using and whatever, but this one goes very deep. So that's a really great to have a systems report. Bill asked earlier before we started about updates. And if you take a notice clear up to the very top of my screen with my mouse, you'll see a little shield, and that's my update manager, and it tells me I have 7 updates. If I click on that, what I want you to notice about it tells you what type it is. That's kind of an important one right there with that. And this one shows that those are a couple of upgrades. And that one is a third party. So software updates, security updates. Yep. Also notice that with Linux, I'm allowed to pick and choose which ones to do. And it may very well be that I've heard that, oh, don't get that rustic. There's something wrong with that one. So I could just choose not to pick that one. But it always tells me when I've got something. I could probably go and do some fine tuning and set it up to be able to update some of it automatically, but I like my control. But that's where it is, Bill. It shows it right up there and tells me I've got some updates. Update Manager gives me the control of how these updates go. We were just here, but if I go up to Edit and I go to Preferences, this one's nice because I have some real control. I can tell it how often to check for updates, how many put time in between it, tell about the notifications that I want. I can hide the update manager, that little shield after the updates. I just like to have it show all the time because it makes it easier to know that there's an update because, oh, the little red dot shows me. And automation, this is where you be careful that you can say to updates. And notice up here, this is nice. Bill was asking also about this updates. If it's not something that came with the computer or installed through the software store, if I've done it myself, I have to take care of the updates. But if you're using flat packs, then you can turn it on to say, update the regular software and update the flat packs automatically. Oh, what else we got here? Cal showed the disks, and the disks, we've always talked a lot about gparted, and it does a lot of partitioning, managing stuff, but this one will too. If I won't mess with it too much because this is my main computer, but you've got the options that you can format partitions and edit partitions, create partitions, resize. So what is happening is that a lot of the distros are saying, well, why don't we just take what's in gparted and incorporate that into our disk management program? Works out really well. Also, because I'm logged in as John doing this, then the owner of these disks usually is John instead of root. If it's root, you have trouble trying to save to it because only root can do it, and I'm not root. under keyboard, you can choose which kind of keyboard you want. I wanted to look at, oh, this one's kind of neat. Some of us spend too much time at our keyboard. You can set up a notification that it's time for you to stand up, get out of the way, get your hands off the keyboard and take a break. And so the preferences do that. One of the things that Dave said, he had trouble, he didn't like one of the distros because he had trouble with the keyboard shortcuts. Mint has a keyboard shortcut settings, and you come here and create, they already have some pre-set up ones, and all you have to do is tell what keys you want to do. So that makes this one really easy, David, to set that up. Typical, you've got the power management, nothing big on that. When we go down to, I don't mess with the network stuff too much. If you go down to look and feel appearance, we have this. This is where you go and set your themes, and it doesn't like me because there's a required thing here. Required window manager theme is not installed. I just changed that. Oh, because I went back to the dark blue. But this is where you can pick pre-designed themes for colors of your folders and whether your dark version. You also get to go to your backgrounds and choose backgrounds, which will take a second to populate. There we go. And you can also get more backgrounds. You also can control your fonts and the font style that you do, and questions about how do you want it to look. Do you want icons in your menus? Do you want icons on your buttons? And they give you a choose here. And I always like to have, so if you can look carefully, this theme makes it hard. There's a question mark in front of the word help, and over in close, there's an X. So I choose to have icons and text all the time on my choices by personal preference. Desktop. What do you want to see on your desktop? I don't like anything on my desktops. Working your Windows Manager. And on the interface, do you want to see, again, we just saw that. Do you want icons and buttons? And do you want your text beside it or below it? All personal preferences that are part of these unusual settings. One thing that we have here is main menu. And this, as Cal mentioned, some of the menus, if there are no programs installed, they don't show you that category. But Mint has a menu settings manager that lets me choose exactly which categories I want to see on my menu. Like, since I'm not a programmer, you can see I have programming turned off. I don't have any games yet. I need to go back and put games on here. And then once you pick on those, then you can take care of that. So you have a lot of control over your menu, which you can either put favorites on, but this is the whole actual menu that you can control. Languages, yep. Oh, pop-up notifications. I decided I like the new theme better. Where do you want to see your pop-ups? So when I do that, you can see that this one's nice. It's kind of a little bit more attractive than what I was doing before. That one was just a plain black background. So I've changed mine to that. So control your pop-ups in your way. And I can enable a do not disturb option, which we always do on Zoom, usually when we say stop, don't bother us. One of the things that's been big in Linux, and was started maybe with the Mate desktop, is that we have welcome screens now. And on the welcome screens, a lot of times they give you what to do. One of the things I really like about Mint that makes it so easy for a new user is after you get past the welcome page, and you can see that I'm that same one that Larry was talking about, we're all using 23. It gives you, well, here are the first things you need to do. Pick a desk color, pick a snapshot setup, check your drivers, update your computer, check out your system, go to the software store, adjust your firewall if you want, and documentation. Mint has a huge file that you can go, that's either in PDF or EPUB, and then you can go check on just what's the new features and the release notes, and also get some help from the forum or the chat rooms. And if you want to contribute, you can contribute. So these have become very popular in helping people get started. Then when you don't want to see it, you can just check the box and say, don't show it every time I started. This one doesn't have it, but there are some distros that have an about me that you can put all your information, like your name and address and phone numbers and email addresses and all sorts of stuff, and keep it. And then I'm guessing that the operating system then can pull from that if it needs to fill in. About the only thing you do here is change a password or change a picture. And I'm going to change mine because it's got to go with Penguin. Oh, that's a different Penguin than I picked last night. And so now my picture is the Penguin. Let's see what else. Of course, we have the preferred apps. Where'd you go? There we go. Mint offers more choices than some of the other distros, because I can choose 3 different things on my internet. What's my preferred default app? Under media, under the system, under Office, and accessibility. Sometimes there's only 3 or 4 that you can choose, but Mint gives you a lot of choices for setting up. I don't do instant message, so that doesn't go. But on your all media, by default, it would be the celluloid because that's the one that comes. But since I have added, I could do either the MPV media player, which is the basis for celluloid, or not. And of course, we also have the startup apps, just like in Windows, that I can determine what programs start up automatically. Some of this stuff, I don't know what it is, so I don't mess with it. But some of it I've added, like, for example, I didn't want any desks to start up all the time. I have it as a shortcut that if I want to start it, but I don't. So this lets you pick and choose what you want to start automatically. One thing I always start automatically is an onboard screen keyboard. If my keyboard would die all of a sudden, I would be having a problem, but there's an onboard keyboard that I can access and do like you do on a tablet. And let's see. Now, those are pretty much, all that. You can see that some of them had sub things, but I want to go to minimize that. I want to go to another setting that if I go to my main menu, which for me is over on the right. Nope, I said main menu, not that. Main menu. That I wanted to go and look at preferences. And this will be very similar to the same menu that Cal had, only Cinnamon does it a little bit different. With Mint, I have 3 sections: places, system things, and my applications. It's by choice. The designer says we like this one. I like this setup better, so that's why I use Mate. But under preferences, it said to go to system tools. Make my notes. Oh, no, go to System Tools here. And have to check out one program that is big here. It's called Time Shift. And this would be similar to the old Windows restore points. I had to get to that. This is the one that I use to back up my system so that if something goes bad, files or programs load up and crash, malware would get in for some reason, mess up. This is what I use and go back. I always keep my software separately backed up like you saw, but this one is set up on a system where you can see that I have 6 daily backups and 1 weekly backup, and then after 3 weeks I have a monthly backup. And so this way I can go back a number of different options, not just each day, but I can jump back and say, well, a week ago the computer's working fine, and so I can just restore a point back to that. And this is done automatically on making those snapshots. The other thing was showing power statistics. You can see that my adapter, I'm plugged in with that laptop, and I have a mouse, and my mouse tells me what I have and my history and my statistics. And so this is good, be able to, if you had both a battery powered keyboard, mouse, battery powered headset. So they got a really good system there to do that. Not that. What was there? Preferences have a lot of what was in the other one, and I'm trying to remember because I didn't do a good note. Qt5 is another kind of a subsetting for like the Mate, and there are lots more settings that you can do there. Screensaver. And the last thing that I was going to do was to make sure you saw that we have a system monitor just like in Windows, and Cal includes that. So that's great. I think that's about it for programs. So I'm going to stop the sharing and switch back to my other computer. And change my, yeah, all right, I'm back. So there's your today's with distro hopping, regular software that is the default that comes with generally. I think we could just say that with Linux, except for Peppermint now, when you install a Linux, it's ready to go out of the box with all the software you need, not maybe the software you want. And that's where Cal showed you, he added some, I add some, Dave would probably add some, because we want it to be our machine. Cal, would you go back and show the TV program that's unique to Linux Mint, that you can watch foreign TV and stuff? That Hypernautics or whatever. Somebody wanted to see that again because that's unique to Mint. You know, not all of the Linux distros have that, but Mint does.
Aha, did somebody send you a question?
Yeah, that was a personal friend.
Oh, okay, we allow that.
yeah, came in late, forgot on that. Can you do that for us, Cal? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I was gonna let him do it since he's the one that showed it.
And then I have questions for you.
Okay. Cal, I can go back and run to the other one. So screen share this one again.
All right, I'm back with you now.
Okay, can you show
Let's
us?
see, I've got it somewhere. Let's see. Share the screen. And there it is. So this is what you wanted?
Correct.
Yeah, so, uh-oh. I started it up.
That's okay, because that way they can see that we're
Yeah.
really watching foreign TV.
Right. Love to see that.
Yes. So it's pretty good. Not every country lets you do it, but
Can you go pull the program back up again?
all right, hold on. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah, it's called
Hypnotic.
hypnotics. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
So you click on a different country and it'll give you the number of stations that it allows. And sometimes it comes up right away and sometimes it takes.
Tasmania. We had motor racing here, we've got history here, people recognise you in the streets. Why wouldn't you want to live in one?
A town famous for its motor racing history.
Grand Prix drivers come from all over the world to compete here at Melbourne.
What a way to hit town, I love it. Embracing change in an ever-changing world.
So similar to, listening to radio or radios around the country, you can listen to a lot of the TV, and as he showed on that, there were some, free movies and stuff. So that's another thing that, like I said, is unique right now to Linux Mint, and it works in all three versions.
Yeah, I think they just came out with that maybe a version before, and it got a lot better. The movies are Pluto movies, and you have to go to the Pluto site to get kind of a listing of what's coming up. They don't have a way to. There's not a program listing, but it's pretty interesting.
And it's not for Windows, huh?
That
For Windows, you have to go directly to the different websites. What this is doing is amalgamating the websites together, as best as I can tell.
Yep. Okay, darn, that's cool. George is looking for a Linux distro that will run on a small touch-sensitive screen with smartphone-sized icons.
under your themes, you can adjust the size of icons. I always make mine bigger because I'm getting old, but then if I can make them bigger, you can make them smaller. Now, is he talking about a computer or a tablet?
Small touch sensitive screen. He'll come on and ask that better.
Yeah.
John, with your backup tool, does it work with any Linux distro? Where can you get it?
If you want to find out, you go to your software store for your particular distro and look for it. A number of different distros will have some kind of, backup. It's a very common program. It's not unique to Mint.
Yeah, I think the most common one is called Deja Vu.
Correct. And
DEJAVU.
Oh,
and I think that if you would go to the about for the backup program, it'll probably say that it's based on Deja Vu, because in the open source world, we take something and we modify it a little bit better and put a different name on it. Generic backup. So yeah, Deja Vu, I've used that before. Backup is what comes with mine. So check.
That's the name, just plain backup.
Or Deja Vu.
What is time shift?
Time shift would be the equivalent of Windows restore points. And there's Macs have a name for their time program, but look it up, time shift. It's kind of unique to Mint, but everybody else will say, hey, open source, we're going to make a different version of it.
I'm actually putting a list together for our backing up workshop.
Okay.
Next to World Backup Day. Okay, hold on. Comment, KDE has KB shortcuts as well. John, where in the world are you putting all those backups?
Backups for?
All those ones you said I do them, and then I do them,
Oh, backups go to external drives.
Okay.
Yeah, time shift is stored on the root of your main drive. So it's a backup of your system in case you have a problem after an update. If you need a backup of your system itself, you just go get a new ISO.
I would say, you said restore after an update, or after you've tried something and said, I'm going to experiment with this, and
Right.
then you have to use that because human person, the guy in the chair, did it.
Yep.
We have someone that I don't think is attended a Linux workshop before, and he says, I've been playing with Mint and have gathered a lot of information this morning.
Great, great. We recommend it.
Ron has questions on installation. Linux with VirtualBox installed. Are you using it with hardware to secure boot?
My computers run with secure boot off because I'm not a Windows user.
Okay.
You can turn the secure boot on with Linux, but it's not for the faint of heart.
John, Google search says the game Civilization 6 will run on Ubuntu 16. Will Civ 6 run on Mint?
I'm not a gamer, but it would tell you. Now, because the question could be, is he running that game under Wine, which is a program that simulates Windows, so you can run Windows programs on it? Because if that's the case, then you can put Wine on Mint and run that game. It's tricky because some games are written to run on a piece of hardware directly, or we have to use Steam or Play on Linux or Wine that lets you play programs that are not designed for your operating system.
Has anybody tried Linux FX that can install with either Windows 10 or 11 user interface?
My answer is no, I don't want it to look like Windows 10. I want it to be like Linux. But a number of us have done it, and I don't know how they get away with all the copyright infringement that they do. But, you know, my feeling is if you don't want to be Windows 10 or 11, because I've had somebody take a computer, Linux computer, and make it look exactly like Windows 11. You know, if you want to run Windows, run Windows. If you want to run Linux, run Linux. And
that question right there started my conversation about Linux with Bob from Sun City, Florida group on what he was doing at. He wondered, several months ago, if anybody had used that. And I asked and nobody had. I have no more questions. So we're going to go over to Larry Fort now.
let me get the button clicked here. Make it so that I don't have to click everybody. Larry, over to you.
I just wanted to comment a little bit on Hypnotics, which is in the Linux Mint distribution. What you were showing there was the free channels that come with it, but you can also, if you have a paid IPTV subscription service, you can add that and get many more TV stations and movies and things like that. And you can add multiple IPTV subscribers to it. So ApolloGroup.tv is a website that where you can purchase paid IPTV subscriptions. Chemo IPTV is another one. Some of those are a little sketchy, but Hypnotics gives you the ability to add those paid subscriptions.
I personally would like to see a little mini presentation on Hypnotics.
I could do that.
Thank you so much. I look right here in ink.
Down.
Got it.
Good. While we mentioned the word presentation, while most of the people are still here before we start losing people as we go. Next month, just so you know, our Linux Learning Linux is going to be a roundtable, and we're going to continue with the theme of software. But what we're going to do is we're going to categorize a number of different categories. We're going to list a number of different categories of software, and it's going to be the open forum for the whole thing, where our team will say, to start off the ball rolling, what do they use for this particular job? And then we're going to let everybody else, share, well, what do they use? What do they like to use? And the goal is that at the end of the time, we are going to have maybe a listing of the top programs for each category that we talk about, new software that you can say, well, that sounds good, I'm going to give that one a try. Or you may even hear enough that you said, well, I thought about it, I was looking at that, but based on the discussion, nope, don't want to do it. So we want you to be back. We'll probably send out like the categories so that you'll have time enough to kind of make a list of yourself for what you use to share with us, because we want everybody sharing, because we want to hear what's the most popular, what's something new and unique, blah, blah. Then that's March. April is going to be, March is that. April is going to be a Learning Linux, a Linux for Beginners, which is going to be a follow-up from January, which is everyday activities. In January, we talked about things that we do in Linux that you do in Windows. And in April, we're going to talk specifically about the exact things you do, the tools, the exact actions. So it's going to be a follow-up for beginners to further show you, here's what we do. And so that's then. So then we're working on May, I think, then. And so this is where we need to have suggestions on other topics. We're gathering some, but give us some ideas. We're running on ideas. So send those to us. All right.
I am going to have to get my act together with scheduling the rest of the presentations. You are done through April.
Yep.
Wow, I am impressed.
I thought I had May too, but then.
Oh, well.
No. All right. Hey, my good buddy, John, talk to us.
I assume you mean John Mazer, right? John.
Absolutely.
You're up in the corner with your hand raised.
Yep.
I wasn't sure. Hey, I just want to let you know that I recently installed PC Linux OS, and I am loving it. I think there might be some people in the group here on the call that have it installed, but the latest version of PC Linux OS is like awesome. That's all I can say. It even came with Zoom installed, so I didn't have to worry about installing Zoom on it, and it's got all the software you need to do your daily computing. The only thing that I installed extra was I'm a big fan of the Brave browser, so I installed the Brave browser. But other than that, it has everything that you could possibly need in a distro. And the one thing that I think people need to understand is, like, I haven't really touched my Windows machine like for 2 weeks now, because I'm able to do everything I could do with the Windows machine on the Linux machine. So I would challenge people to, find a distro that they like, and then put away your Windows machine for a couple of weeks and try to do everything on the Windows machine, on the Linux machine, and see how it goes for you. But I can't say enough about the PC Linux OS. It's running KDE-Plasma, and the icons are so modernized, and it's just fantastic.
So John, is that for Dummy Judy?
You could.
Well, I met John without an H.
Oh,
so I think yes, definitely. I think the biggest thing that people have a problem with is the install. Once you get past the install, it's like using a Mac OS. It's like using a Windows machine. Yeah, so definitely, it's definitely for Judy. Yes, once you get, and then the install wasn't. Believe it or not, I couldn't believe it. I was running the install, or I'm sorry, I was running the ISO off of a thumb drive that had multiple distros on it, and I didn't really actually time it out, but I swear it installed in like 10 minutes, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's done already? And I'm like, whoa. And sure enough, I ejected the thumb drive, and it booted up to the desktop, and it was all good. The one thing that I was really impressed with, and they've really gotten better at this with the Linux distros, is this machine that I'm running is an i3 it's got a 750 gigabyte hard drive, and it has 16 gigs of RAM. So it's pretty beefy. But the impressive thing is that this was a HP all-in-one that I hadn't been using for quite a while. In fact, it had Windows 8.1 on it. There was so much dust on it, I couldn't, I had to scrub it off. But anyway, it was a touch screen when it was the Windows machine, and the actual touch screen works on the Linux side right out of the box. Didn't have to do a darn thing to make the touch screen work. So yeah, that was really impressive for me that they made the touch screen work on this. So
yeah, I like the PC Linux OS too. And the only problem that I ran into you couldn't dual boot and share the same home partition. The file system was different between the two. So once you ran one, you couldn't access the other. But I got to say that they dropped what I loved about PC Linux OS. They had a special version that had Windows, or the virtual desktops, that were all programmed. One window was all of your audio video. One window was all of your production. And so when you clicked on that, all of the icons you needed were right there for each of those different sections, but they dropped that one.
Well, that was stupid. Sorry. Pittsburgh John, Ron is going to have a question for you. Go ahead, Cal, I'm going to jump to Ron because he's got a PC hoo-ha question.
Hey, John and John Kennedy, both of you. I've been trying to install the PC Linux, and it failed. And I also tried to install Peppermint and it failed also on the 32-bit version. And I also tried to install Mint and it failed. The computer I have it's an AMD, it's 8 gigs of RAM. And I mean, I blew away Windows to try to get this thing up and I'm not having any luck. So I don't know if you know of anybody besides John Mazer in the Pittsburgh area that's a guru on this stuff. I'd be greatly appreciated.
Have you been able to install any other distros other than those two?
Just the 3. I tried the 3. I haven't tried anything else.
None of them worked?
No, Peppermint, and Linux Mint went the whole way through when I said, shut your computer off, restart it. And then I get IRQ handler for vector errors. I get something that says here, BusyBox, Ubuntu,
Good old BusyBox
crash. So I have no idea.
Where are you getting your distros to install? I mean, the ISOs.
DistroWatch.
Okay, so they should be the legit ones.
Now
What's the? Yeah, I'll let somebody else answer too. But sometimes it's a video problem that it installs, and then when you rebooted your computer because of a video issue, can't produce it.
Okay.
Can you?
Any other solutions, Pittsburgh John?
Well, this is John from Pittsburgh. It was running fine off of the live distro, and then when he would do the install and reboot is when it came up with error messages. So I would have thought if it was having video issues, it wouldn't even allow him to boot the live distro.
Well, the other thing could be is that the live distro is using some generic drivers, and when it tries to go to his computer, the drivers for his video don't match up and it won't reproduce. But did you say Ron, did you say you did do it through the live one? It worked?
Yeah, I had no issue. I used multi-boot. I tried it all. I had like one of those 3 plus a couple other ones I haven't tried yet, but I put them all in thumb drive. No problem whatsoever. Worked great.
Okay.
So I figured I'd do an install, and that's when I had problems.
Yeah, if somebody wants to else, but I'm thinking it's a graphic problem. That once it's loaded to the computer, that it's not matching up because of the driver that's on your computer versus what was on the live one.
So is there,
I had a comment regarding, I wondered if it was GPT versus, no, I can't say the other word, the different boot options.
MBR.
MBR, thank you. Because I've had that issue as well. It works off the live, and then when I try and boot it for real, I never get a screen back, but you're getting actual errors.
Yeah, well, what happened is I actually, right before I got on today, I tried, it booted up to 2 different versions of, well, I tried the Peppermint. It booted up to 2 different versions of Peppermint. And the one Peppermint had like 0.037, I don't know what it was. So I figured, well, I'll just hit that, what the heck. So it started actually booting up, and then I got a blank screen and it just shut. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I suspected, the MBR versus GPT, because I think I got the same thing. It started to boot, and then I got a blank screen with a cursor in the upper left corner, and that was all I got. But yet the live works just fine.
How do you correct that? Or
that's a really good. I think it has to go into the BIOS.
All right. So
Here's
assuming you got your BIOS set up,
yeah.
What I've had to do is, and I generally do this with Ubuntu. First off, Fedora is different, but you load it. You got to make sure your machine is that you petitioned your drive as GPT. It probably is because it came with Windows and it's petitioned as GPT. You got to set your BIOS with GPT. Ubuntu will set it up. And then if you add a second one, you have to update Grub. There's a whole, I'd have to go and I spent about a week working on this. And EFI booting is different from the old MBR booting quite a bit. So have you tried to just do the entire disk wipe away?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I didn't try to dual boot. I blew
So
away
you
Windows.
let it do its automatic thing.
Yeah,
I would, if Ubuntu, if you let it do its automatic thing and you have partitioned your drive as GPT and you have your BIOS set as GPT, it will set up the system. I always wipe the whole disk before I start, but anyway, what you have is a boot problem, not a video problem.
okay.
Cal, could I give your email address to Ron and John because they're in the same group, so they can maybe get a definitive, this is what you need to do answer from you?
Okay.
Thank you. I will. John, Pittsburgh John, I will send you Cal's email address so you guys can get in touch with him, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thank you very much.
Has anyone found a Linux functional replacements for Quicken that you like?
That's for that'd be good for next month's meeting.
We get that question all the time, and nobody with Linux is happy with anything.
No, there's no solution because all of your CPAs use Quicken or QuickBooks.
What is selecting for the install? Is that erase and install?
When you do an install, your first option is let it do itself and wipe out whatever's there and then install the option. Second choice is to do it yourself where you can partition, or no, second choice is where you can install alongside of the existing operating system. And third choice is that you do it yourself where you make partitions and assign the operating system to one partition, home to another partition, and swap to another partition.
And over to Tim, who might have another answer for one of our problems here.
Offhand, you have a possible situation with Ron's issue. I've never seen MBR GPT in the BIOS, first off. That's a partitioning setup feature. The second thing, however, is in the BIOS, since this was an old Windows machine, I understood, you may have to turn off secure boot in the BIOS. That does interfere with some Linuxes running on an old Windows system. The secure boot will just drive things nutty for a lot of the Linuxes.
Thank you. And George is going to tell us what small device he's looking for Linux.
Well, actually, I was going to suggest that he not install, that fellow who's having the trouble with installing, don't try to install from the multi-boot thumb drive. Make a thumb drive that has just got the one distribution ISO on it and try installing from that. Because when they do these, some of these multi-boot solutions actually unwrap the ISO and make some modifications and keep that running. So you might, that's an older problem. I don't know if he's having that. Regarding my touchscreen, it's running on a Raspberry Compute Module 4.
Oh.
So, and it's just a touchscreen. So there is a Ubuntu Touch. I don't know if anybody's tried installing that. There's a distro called Ubuntu Touch.
Right. That was their dream for their phone.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But they've stopped supporting that, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who's doing anything that this display is about 5 inches by 7 inches and it runs Raspberry Pi, but I can't read it at that size.
I've not used one.
There are a number of operating systems that Pine has used for their Pine phone, and you might check into Pine. I'm sure the website, and see what they're using, and you might be able to just download that operating system that's for the phone and use it on that.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I'll try
But
that.
Pine book, and they have a Pine book, and they have a Pine phone, and they have a Pine watch. And I was reading before, and they would tell about, okay, we're using this custom-made distribution for the phone.
Yeah, and the build has to have the hardware because it's a squashed FS versus a regular x86. So I agree with John, a Pine might be the best bet.
I just put a link in the chat box on 20 operating systems you can use with a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if that'll help. It's from Fossmint. Do we have any other questions? You know we love questions. We
I wanted to
usually
make
have
one
the
comment.
answers.
I wanted to make a comment about PC Linux OS. They do have a monthly magazine, which is very good.
Yeah, and the thing with PCOS, I loved it, but it wasn't a Debian branch, so that there were things that you do like in the command line that were different that I had a hard time kind of migrating to. But I liked it as an independent group. I thought it was a good distro, and I was sad when they got rid of that big fancy one, because that was neat. Click on this desktop, all of your audio and visual. Click on this, all your internet. Click on this window, all of that. You didn't have to use your menus anymore.
Cool. I'm a visual person, so I love icons. No,
Yep.
not really not on your desktop, but I'm looking for ideas for the rest of the Wednesday workshops. If you have something like hypnotics that you would like to give a presentation on, a mini presentation, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that's great, because I can find other ones that are just short mini presentations. Get in touch, please. I'd appreciate it. John and I hang around and try to think of various and sundry things, but then we have to find somebody to give it. A poor Bill, I've got him scheduled for a couple. This is one for Bill. You need to be doing a new presentation. So how about putting a presentation together about fill in the blank? And of course, his are all Windows oriented, which is great because the majority of APCUG uses Windows. The Central Florida Computer Society and Florida and the Brookdale users group, computer users group had a joint meeting, and I understand they did a lot of sharing of information. John Kennedy was attended, and they just had a gay old time doing that. There, if you are interested, you don't have a Linux SIG at your group. There are groups out there. Chicago, Tim has started one that is new. The Columbus, John Kennedy has one at the East Central Ohio group. Central Florida has started it after Mike Ungerman was attending the Linux Wednesday workshops. And Brookdale's has been going on forever and a day. But you're more than welcome, with our group sharing information list that I put together, to attend any of them. The more the merrier. And if you need information about that, get in touch with me. And that's all I have to say, Mr. Kennedy. And if nobody has any more questions, we thank Dave Melton, who will be talking about almost the same thing tonight at our club meeting, and Cal and John. thank you so much for taking the time to put the presentations together again. And if you have a SIG and you would like to have somebody who is given a presentation at one of the Wednesday Linux workshop, I'm going out on a limb here, it's a possibility that they would be available to give it to your Linux SIG members. Walk us off, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, and a reminder that next month is software, and the next month after that is Linux for beginners on specific tasks. And we'll glad you joined us today. We'll see you next week for everything about Windows 11 and Bill James.
Deep dive on Windows 11. You guys can close your ears, but we want to say that anyway.
Sure. We all like to know what's trying to get as good as Linux.
Oh, too cool, John. You just have all these little one-liners right there ready to go, don't you?
They come up.
John,
all right.
John from Pittsburgh has a comment.
Nope, that was a clapping hands.
Oh, he was clapping hands. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for attending. We appreciate it.
And thanks, Bill, for helping out. And Judy, as always, thanks for being our question gal with seeking
No answers.
Yeah, with no answers. You have some.
Yes,
all right,
it is
thanks.
true.
Okay, if anybody needs to save chat, do that. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of February. Spring is coming.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Cal. And Orv, if you watch this afterwards, hope everything went well today for your knee.
And
Yes.
just think, he's got a 2-story house and a step down to his radio room.
And he may have to sleep on the couch for a while.
Yes, he
know.
may.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. We're
Thank
getting
you.
out of here.